the manipulation of history and religion. What if everything you've been told about God, religion, and history itself was a carefully crafted deception? For centuries, humanity has lived under the illusion that the battle between good and evil began with religion, that divine authority has always guided civilization. But what if the truth is far older, hidden beneath layers of rewritten history? Religious institutions, governments, and elite priesthoods have spent thousands of years shaping the way we understand God and the origins of faith. They've told us that the stories in sacred texts are divine revelations, yet these very scriptures were altered, reinterpreted, and repackaged to serve control rather than enlightenment. The greatest deception ever imposed upon humanity is not just about faith, it's about power. Those who control belief, control reality itself. I used to be a pastor, dedicating my life to preaching the Word of God, convinced that I was sharing divine truth. But when I started asking real questions that challenged the official narrative, I found myself cast out. What I discovered shook the very foundation of my beliefs. The idea of a single, all-powerful God, one who demands obedience, rewards loyalty, and punishes those who stray, was not an original concept. It was a framework borrowed from an ancient war long before the Bible was written. This conflict was not between mortals. It was a battle between gods, a struggle for dominance over humanity's destiny. The spiritual and political systems we live under today were shaped by a war that took place in the distant past, a war between two powerful forces, one that sought control and absolute rulership, and another that stood for wisdom and enlightenment. This war did not end, it was simply rewritten, disguised, and embedded into the very religions we follow today. The Old Testament, often considered the foundation of monotheism, carries echoes of this ancient battle. The idea of one supreme deity, a god of war who demands devotion, mirrors the ideology of Marduk, the Babylonian god, who sought to erase all other gods and establish himself as the one true ruler. The priests of Marduk ensured that his reign would not be forgotten, embedding his legacy into prophecy and doctrine that would shape future generations. By controlling the narrative, history was rewritten to serve those in power. The result? A world where humanity is kept in spiritual chains, where questioning authority is labeled as heresy, and where the search for true knowledge is discouraged. But now, the deception is unraveling. The truth, hidden for millennia, is resurfacing for those who are ready to see it. The real question is, will you continue to accept the story you've been told, or will you seek the knowledge that was stolen from you? The war between Marduk and Thoth. Long before the rise of organized religion, before the prophets of the Old Testament warned of divine wars and the coming of a new kingdom, an ancient battle raged across the earth. This was not a war between humans. It was a war between gods, a struggle that would shape the spiritual and political systems that still govern us today. At the heart of this cosmic conflict were two brothers, Marduk and Thoth. Both were sons of Enki, the great architect of humanity, and both were destined for greatness. But while they shared a divine lineage, they were not allies. Their battle was not just about power, it was about the very future of humankind. Marduk, ambitious and relentless, sought absolute dominion over the earth. He believed that order could only be maintained through control. One god, one ruler, one destiny for mankind. To him, divine kingship was the only way to ensure stability. He envisioned a world where all people bowed to a single authority, where faith and law were dictated from above, and where deviation was met with destruction. Thoth, on the other hand, was the keeper of wisdom, the guardian of sacred knowledge. He did not seek to rule, but to guide. To him, true power did not come from control, but from enlightenment. He believed that knowledge should be shared freely, that humanity should evolve through understanding rather than submission. While Marduk sought to impose his rule through force, Thoth sought to empower humanity with wisdom, teaching them the secrets of the universe, the cycles of time, and the path to higher consciousness. Their war was more than a battle of might, it was a war of ideology. Would humanity be ruled by a singular god-king who demanded obedience, or would they be free to pursue enlightenment and knowledge? Marduk's rise to power was swift and ruthless. Declaring himself the supreme deity, he led a conquest not just of land and people, but of belief itself. The priesthoods loyal to him rewrote history, erasing the names of the old gods and replacing them with his own. His ideology became the foundation of monotheism, an all-powerful ruler demanding devotion, offering rewards for loyalty, and punishing those who disobeyed. Thoth, however, resisted. He preserved knowledge in secret, hiding it within ancient texts and mystery schools. His teachings, recorded in the Emerald Tablets, spoke of cosmic balance, divine cycles, and the hidden wisdom that could free humanity from spiritual enslavement. But as Marduk's influence spread, Thoth's wisdom was condemned as forbidden knowledge. His name was whispered only in secret while Marduk's rule became law. This war did not end with their lifetime. Its consequences have rippled through history, shaping the religions, governments, and belief systems we see today. The battle between control and enlightenment is still being fought, and the outcome will determine the future of humanity. Will we continue to live under the rule of a divine king, or will we reclaim the wisdom that was stolen from us? Marduk and the rise of monotheism. The concept of a single, all-powerful God, one who rules over humanity with absolute authority, was not born from divine revelation. It was crafted, enforced, and embedded into human civilization by those who sought to control both the physical and spiritual world. And at the center of this transformation stood Marduk, the Babylonian god who rewrote history to ensure that his rule would never be challenged. Marduk did not just seek to rule over Babylon. He sought to rule over all belief systems. His conquest was not only military, it was ideological. He understood that true power was not just in armies or empires, but in controlling the minds and faith of the people. To solidify his authority, his priests worked tirelessly to erase the names of other gods, declaring that only Marduk was worthy of worship. He was not just a king of Babylon, he was the one true God, the supreme ruler of heaven and earth. This shift laid the foundation for monotheism as we know it today. The Old Testament, often seen as the beginning of monotheistic faith, carries deep echoes of Marduk's rise. The Hebrew people, exiled in Babylon, lived under his rule, surrounded by his priesthood and their teachings. They were immersed in a world where divine kingship was absolute, where the idea of one supreme God eradicating all false idols was a central doctrine. When they returned from exile, they did not just bring their faith back with them, they carried the blueprint of Marduk's rule, reshaped into their own vision of God. The God of the Old Testament bears striking similarities to Marduk's ideology. He is not simply a benevolent creator, he is a God of war, conquest, and absolute control. He demands exclusive worship, destroys nations that refuse to obey, and rewards only those who remain loyal. The book of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel repeatedly emphasize the destruction of rival gods, the establishment of a divine kingdom, and the punishment of those who turn away all concepts that were at the core of Marduk's Babylonian rule. Even the Ten Commandments, which command absolute devotion to one God and forbid the worship of others, mirror the proclamations made by Marduk's priesthood. His goal was always the same: erase the old gods, replace them with himself, and ensure that future generations saw his rule as destiny rather than conquest. This was not just religion, it was spiritual warfare. By controlling prophecy, doctrine, and sacred texts, Marduk's priesthood ensured that the concept of a single ruling God would survive through history. What billions today consider divine truth may, in fact, be the lasting influence of an ancient ruler who sought to shape the future in his own image. The question remains, was the rise of monotheism truly the will of God, or was it the greatest act of spiritual manipulation in human history? The suppression of knowledge and the Tower of Babel. History is written by those who seek control. And one of the greatest deceptions ever imposed upon humanity is the idea that knowledge is dangerous, that seeking truth is an act of defiance against divine authority. This belief was not born from morality or faith. It was engineered to keep humanity in ignorance, ensuring that only a select few would ever have access to the deeper mysteries of existence. Nowhere is this more evident than in the story of the Tower of Babel, one of the most misunderstood events in religious history. According to the biblical narrative, mankind once spoke a single language and worked together to build a tower that would reach the heavens. But God, angered by their ambition, confounded their speech and scattered them across the earth, ensuring that they would never again unite in such a way. For centuries, this story has been taught as a warning against human arrogance, a lesson in humility that reminds us not to challenge divine authority. But when we trace this story back to its Sumerian and Babylonian origins, a very different truth emerges, one that reveals an intentional suppression of knowledge. The Tower of Babel was not simply a building. It was a symbol of enlightenment, a representation of humanity's attempt to reclaim the divine wisdom that had been stolen from them. In the ancient world, knowledge was power, true spiritual knowledge, the kind that allowed people to understand their place in the universe, the cycles of time, and the hidden forces that shaped reality. This knowledge was once freely shared, passed down through the mystery schools and sacred teachings of Thoth, the god of wisdom and keeper of hidden truths. But for Marduk, knowledge was a threat because an enlightened people could never be ruled. Marduk's conquest was not just about eliminating rival gods, it was about erasing access to divine wisdom. His priesthood worked tirelessly to rewrite history, ensuring that his authority could never be questioned. The destruction of the Tower of Babel was not an act of divine punishment, but an act of control. By dividing humanity, splitting them into different languages, cultures, and religions, Marduk ensured that the deeper truths of existence would remain hidden. Rather than working together in unity, humanity would be fractured, lost in endless conflicts, unable to rediscover the knowledge that had once been theirs. This suppression of wisdom did not end with Babel. It was the beginning of a long history of burning sacred texts, silencing truth seekers, and labeling forbidden knowledge as heresy. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria, the persecution of Gnostics, and the eradication of mystical traditions all followed the same pattern. Knowledge was dangerous to those in power. The Tower of Babel was never about language. It was about control, and the greatest deception of all was convincing humanity that ignorance was a virtue. Marduk and the prophecies of the end times. For centuries, people have believed that the end times, the apocalyptic battle between good and evil, was a divine prophecy foretelling the return of a righteous ruler who would establish God's kingdom on earth. Billions wait for the arrival of a messianic figure, a chosen one who will defeat the forces of darkness and restore divine order. But what if this prophecy is not what we've been told? What if it is not a vision of salvation, but the final stage of an ancient plan, one designed not to free humanity, but to re-establish control? The book of Revelation, often seen as the ultimate prophecy of the future, is filled with dramatic imagery. A great war in the heavens, a beast rising from the sea, the destruction of false gods, and the return of a divine king. But these symbols did not originate with Christianity. They are echoes of an older story, the war between Marduk and Thoth. The same themes appear in the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, where Marduk slays Tiamat, the chaotic sea goddess, and establishes a new world order under his rule. This was not just mythology. It was the blueprint for future religious prophecies. Marduk's rise to power was built on conquest, both physical and spiritual. He declared himself the one true God, erased the names of the old gods, and ensured that all future generations would see his rule as inevitable, divinely ordained. His priests rewrote history, embedding his supremacy into prophecy, ensuring that people would not only accept his rule, but pray for its return. The idea of a chosen ruler, an anointed king who would destroy the enemies of the divine and establish a new kingdom, did not originate with the Bible. It was a continuation of Marduk's spiritual conquest. The Hebrew prophets who lived under Babylonian rule absorbed this ideology into their own scriptures. Their visions of a coming messianic king, of a final battle against the forces of evil, and of a kingdom that would last forever mirror Babylonian beliefs about Marduk's eternal rule. Even the book of Daniel, with its prophecy of 4 kingdoms and the rise of an everlasting empire, follows the same structure as Babylonian eschatology. If Marduk's prophecy is still unfolding today, then the return of a divine king may not be the liberation we've been promised, but the restoration of an ancient empire of control. Billions may be unknowingly preparing for the return of a ruler who will demand absolute obedience, not offer salvation. Meanwhile, the role of Thoth, keeper of wisdom, guardian of enlightenment, has been erased from the story. If his path were known, It would not lead to a divine ruler enforcing judgment, but to the awakening of humanity itself. The question remains, is the end times prophecy a divine truth, or is it the final chapter in a plan that began thousands of years ago to ensure that Marduk's dominion never truly ends? Thoth and the Path to Enlightenment. For thousands of years, humanity has been conditioned to believe that divine authority comes from above, that knowledge is dangerous, and that obedience leads to salvation. But what if the real key to spiritual awakening has been hidden from us all along? What if the truth was never about waiting for a God to return, but about rediscovering the wisdom that was stolen from us? This is the path that Thoth, the guardian of sacred knowledge, sought to preserve, the path of enlightenment, not domination. Unlike Marduk, who sought to rule through power and control, Thoth believed that true divinity was found through understanding the universe, the cycles of time, and the deeper forces that shape reality. His teachings were not about conquest or obedience, but about awakening, helping humanity realize that they were not meant to be ruled by gods, but to understand their own divine nature. He knew that knowledge was the ultimate key to freedom, and that as long as people remained ignorant, they would remain slaves to those who claimed divine authority. Thoth's wisdom was recorded in the Emerald Tablets, ancient texts that contain the secrets of existence, the laws of the cosmos, and the hidden truths about human consciousness. These writings spoke of spiritual ascension, the idea that humanity was meant to evolve beyond physical and mental limitations, not through worship, but through knowledge. Thoth's teachings revealed that the universe operates on cycles, that civilization rises and falls according to cosmic patterns, and that true power does not come from force, but from understanding. But as Marduk established his rule, he saw Thoth's wisdom as a threat. A world where people sought knowledge for themselves was a world where gods could no longer dictate reality. To maintain control, Marduk and his priesthood declared Thoth's knowledge heretical, labeling it as forbidden, dangerous, even evil. The priesthood worked tirelessly to erase his influence, ensuring that spiritual power remained centralized in the hands of the elite. Instead of knowledge being a path to liberation, it was turned into a sin. This suppression of wisdom is seen in the very foundation of modern religion. The serpent in the Garden of Eden, who offered knowledge to humanity, was a direct echo of Thoth. But in the rewritten version of the story, knowledge was no longer a gift, it was a curse. Those who sought it were cast out, punished, and condemned. The message was clear. Questioning divine authority leads to suffering, and only through blind obedience can one find salvation. Yet, despite the efforts to erase him, Thoth's teachings survived hidden within the mystery schools of Egypt, buried in the texts of the Gnostics, and preserved through secret traditions that refused to let the truth die. While Marduk's followers built empires of control, those who carried Thoth's wisdom kept the path of enlightenment alive, waiting for the time when humanity would be ready to reclaim its power. The war between Marduk and Thoth was never just a battle between gods. It was the first great war of ideas. One side sought obedience, the other sought awakening. Today, the question remains, will humanity continue to follow the path of servitude, or will it finally reclaim the knowledge that was taken from it, the final choice, control or awakening? For thousands of years, humanity has been caught between two opposing forces, one that seeks to rule through fear and one that offers enlightenment through understanding. This is the true nature of the war between Marduk and Thoth, a battle not just of gods, but of ideas, destiny, and human freedom. And though history has been rewritten to hide this struggle, its effects still shape the world today. Marduk's path has dominated human civilization for millennia. His ideology is embedded in our governments, religions, and institutions, all of which demand obedience in exchange for security. We are taught that power belongs to the few, that questioning authority is dangerous, and that salvation can only come from an external force, a ruler, a god, a messiah who will return to save us. This belief keeps humanity trapped in an endless cycle of submission, always looking outward for answers, never realizing that the true power has always been within. Thoth's path, on the other hand, offers something far more dangerous to those in power: liberation. He did not promise a kingdom of conquest or demand worship. He preserved the hidden knowledge that could break the chains of control. He taught that wisdom is not a privilege of the elite, but the birthright of every human being. His message was simple: when people seek knowledge for themselves, they no longer need to be ruled. And that is why his teachings were suppressed, his name erased, his wisdom buried beneath layers of religious doctrine designed to keep people in ignorance. This war has never ended. It continues today, not in ancient temples or celestial battles, but in the minds of every person on earth. We see it in our education systems, where real knowledge is replaced with obedience training. We see it in politics, where people are divided and controlled through fear. We see it in modern religion, where questioning doctrine is considered heresy. And we see it in technology, where access to information is both the greatest tool for enlightenment and the most powerful weapon for control. But perhaps the most important lesson of all is this: Marduk's system only survives as long as people believe in it. The greatest deception ever imposed on humanity is the belief that we must be ruled, that enlightenment is reserved for the chosen few, while the rest must follow blindly. This is the illusion that has kept humanity asleep for millennia. Yet, we stand at a turning point. Never before in history has knowledge been so accessible. Never before has humanity had the chance to break the cycle and reclaim its forgotten wisdom. The choice is no longer just between two ancient gods. It is a choice that every person must make for themselves. Will we continue to wait for salvation, or will we finally awaken to the truth that was stolen from us? Because in the end, prophecy is not destiny. It is a script, and the moment we stop believing in the illusion, the war is over.